Episode 2 of It, Welcome to Derry. How did things go after that theater bloodbath? Let's talk about it. Hey, great to have you here. So as mentioned, today we'll be discussing the second episode of It, Welcome to Derry. I'll give the general premise, some pros and cons, and then a rating of either negative, neutral, or positive. So coming fresh off of last episode's Flying Baby Massacre, the theater projectionist, Hank Grogan, gets blamed for killing the kids. This leads to his arrest and the downward spiral of his daughter Ronnie. And then we have Lily, the girl who survived the theater murders, who encounters her own demons here, and at the end of the episode is taken by her mother to Juniper Hill, a mental hospital from Stephen King's work. And separately, we have Leroy Hanlon's family move into Derry. His wife Charlotte and son Will each have their own traumatizing introductions to the town. And the episode ultimately wraps up with Leroy learning about a top-secret military plan to thwart Cuban and Soviet efforts to threaten the US with nuclear weapons. The general tells Leroy about a weapon meant to bring out one's worst fears, which I assumed here this is Pennywise. And at the end, we see this car being lifted out of the ground of this excavation site, and after doing some researching, I found out that the vehicle belongs to the Bradley Gang, a group of bandits from the 1930s. And inside the car are skeletons of those gang members who were killed by townspeople during a previous massacre. And this seems to be foreshadowing the whole 27-year cycle of violence from Pennywise's impact on Derry, connecting that 1935 massacre to what's taking place now in 1962. Now looking at my pros and cons for this episode, starting off with the pros. So my first one is that the monster design was a big step up for this episode. We had this creepy pregnant mom scene in the pickle jar dad scene in that grocery store that both provided creative ways of terrifying the kids, but in ways that also made sense for their individual characters based on their past. My second pro is that the adult characters that aren't from Derry continue to be strong on screen, with both Leroy and Charlotte Hanlon being easy to root for characters, especially when overcoming the major hurdles of this time period. And then my third and final pro here is the mystery of what the military has found was a great conclusion for this episode. On top of that, all the Easter eggs here, like Dick Halloran or that mental hospital, are fun things to pick up on, but aren't just shoved in your face unnecessarily. And I'm not a die-hard Stephen King follower, so I'm sure I missed plenty of them along the way. Now looking at some of the cons, and my first one is that so far this new group of kids seems even more underwhelming than the ones from the first episode. In some scenes, the acting and dialogue come across like we're in a silly Goosebumps-like TV show, so hopefully they'll wind up improving or just growing on me overall. And then building on that, my second con is that the attempts at comedy here didn't really land for me. Like we have the kids at lunch, or Will and Rich's interaction in the school hallway. It seemed like the writers were trying to be funny, but I just didn't think it worked that well. And then my third and final con that I'll point out is the decision by General Shaw to have Leroy get beat up as a test doesn't really make sense story-wise, and just seemed like an attempt at further covering the time period and how awful these adults in this It universe can be. And now for an overall rating here, episode 2 of It, Welcome to Derry gets a neutral rating. It's about on the same level as episode 1 for me, but I am intrigued on where they'll take the story next. But those are just some of my thoughts. What'd you think? What parts did you like or dislike? Were you a fan of these new mutant monster parents by Pennywise? Share all your thoughts on this show and the It universe as a whole down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.